Fred's hand was shaking as he pulled out the satellite phone from his back pocket, and the look in his eyes made his so-called successful siblings freeze in place like statues. The expensive device gleamed under the living room lights, and when he put it to his ear, his voice dropped so low and cold that it didn't even sound like the same man who had been begging for their acceptance just seconds ago. Hello?
Cancel the transfer. Yes, the one for the Abuja Medical Center and the land allocation for the law firm. Revoke it immediately.
He hung up, and the silence that followed was so thick you could taste it. Josh's confident smirk melted off his face like ice cream in the Lagos sun, and a nervous sweat started breaking out on his forehead. Charity's mouth fell open, and Peter, the one who loved to talk about trespass and legal terms, suddenly looked like he couldn't remember a single word from law school. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here, aren't we? To understand how this family reunion turned into a complete nightmare, we need to rewind the tape and go back to where it all started, because believe me, this story is going to break your heart before it puts it back together. Meet Fred. Frederick Benson, 32 years old, living in Lagos, Nigeria, and he has a problem. Now, his problem isn't that he deals in scrap metal, even though that's what everyone thinks he does. His problem isn't that he dropped out of school, even though his younger siblings love to throw that in his face every chance they get. No, Fred's real problem is that he loved his family too much, and now, that love is being used to choke the life out of him. You see, about 12 years ago, the Benson family wasn't always this divided and broken. They were actually a tight unit, living together in a modest 3-bedroom flat in one of those middle-class neighborhoods in Lagos where everybody knows everybody's business. Their father, Mr. Benson, ran a recycling business, and I'm not talking about the fancy kind with air-conditioned offices and corporate branding. I'm talking about the gritty, heavy-lifting, get-your-hands-dirty scrap metal kind of business. It wasn't glamorous, but it put food on the table and kept the lights on, which was all that mattered. But then, as life loves to do, tragedy came knocking on their door. Mr. Benson got sick, and it wasn't just a regular flu or malaria that could be handled with some drugs from the pharmacy. His kidneys were failing, shutting down one after the other, and the medical bills started piling up like mountains that nobody knew how to climb. The family tried everything they could, but in Nigeria, when you don't have serious money and you need serious medical care, you're basically watching a slow-motion disaster unfold right in front of your eyes. Fred was the eldest child at 20 years old, and he was brilliant, the kind of student that teachers love to brag about. He had just received admission to study engineering at the University of Lagos, which was a massive achievement because that school doesn't just accept anybody. His future was looking bright and promising, like a clear road with no bumps ahead. But then he looked at his younger siblings, Josh, Charity, and Peter, who were still in secondary school and looking up to him like he was their hero. He looked at his sick father lying in that hospital bed, getting weaker every single day. He looked at his mother, who was so overwhelmed with stress and grief that she had started losing weight and couldn't even sleep at night. And Fred made a choice right there and then. A choice that would haunt him and define him for the next decade of his life. He walked into his father's hospital room one evening, sat down beside the bed, and said with a voice full of determination, "Papa, don't worry. I'll handle the business. I'll take care of everything." His father tried to protest, tried to tell him to go to school and pursue his dreams, but Fred had already made up his mind. He dropped out of university before he even started. He traded his textbooks and calculators for heavy industrial gloves and safety boots. He went from studying thermodynamics and engineering principles to bargaining with touts over rusted iron and copper wires in the scorching Lagos sun, breathing in dust and exhaust fumes every single day. A few weeks later, despite all the prayers and hospital visits and medications, their father passed away. He unalived due to the complications from kidney failure, and the grief that hit the family was heavy enough to crush them all. But you know what was even heavier? The bills. The hospital bills, the funeral expenses, the rent that was due, the school fees that couldn't wait. Everything came crashing down at once, and there was nobody else to carry that weight except Fred. So Fred stepped up and became the father figure at just 20 years old, which is an age when most young men are still figuring out how to survive on their own, let alone take care of an entire family. He worked from 4 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, sometimes even later. He inhaled dust that made his lungs burn, cut his hands on jagged pieces of metal until they were covered in scars, and came home every single evening smelling like rust and sweat and engine oil. His friends from secondary school were posting pictures on social media about their campus life and parties, but Fred didn't have time to feel sorry for himself. He had a mission, and that mission was to make sure his siblings didn't suffer the way he was suffering. Every single naira that Fred made from that scrap metal business didn't go into his own pocket. Not one kobo. It went straight to Josh's medical school fees at the University of Ibadan, because Josh had always dreamed of becoming a doctor. It went to Charity's law school tuition in Abuja, because Charity was smart and ambitious and wanted to make something of herself. It went to Peter's flight tickets to the United Kingdom for his master's degree in political science, because Peter had big dreams about changing Nigeria's political landscape. Fred scrubbed the floor every single day, so that his siblings could walk on red carpets and live the lives he had sacrificed for them. Years went by like this, one bleeding into the next. Fred kept working, kept pushing, kept sacrificing. Meanwhile, his siblings graduated from their fancy schools with their fancy degrees and got the big jobs that came with big salaries and even bigger egos. Josh became a top doctor in Abuja, the kind that treated politicians and wealthy businessmen. Charity became a high-flying corporate executive at one of those multinational companies, where they serve catered lunches and hold meetings in glass conference rooms. Peter got himself into politics and started rubbing shoulders with senators and governors, always talking about his bright political future. But here's where the story gets painful, fam. They stopped coming home to Lagos. They stopped calling their big brother except when they needed something, which was usually money for their so-called projects. Fred, I need $50,000 for a conference. Fred, can you send me $70,000 for my office setup? And Fred, being the man he was, always sent the money without hesitation, even when it meant he had to work double shifts and skip meals to make up for it. Slowly but surely, the dynamic shifted in the worst way possible. When Fred called them to check in or just to hear their voices, they wouldn't pick up their phones. When they finally did pick up, usually by accident, the conversations were short and cold and dismissive. Fred, I'm in a meeting right now, make it quick. Fred, why do you always sound so bush? Can't you speak properly? They started treating him like he was an embarrassment, like he was something dirty they needed to hide from their new sophisticated friends in Abuja. Hey my people, if you're loving this story already and you want to see how this family drama unfolds, please like this video and comment where in the world you're watching from. Are you in Lagos? Abuja? London? New York? Let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to our storytelling channel because trust me, this story is about to get even crazier. Now let's get back to Fred, because his nightmare was just beginning. It got worse, believe it or not. Josh, Charity, and Peter started telling their friends in Abuja that they were only children, completely erasing Fred from their family history like he never existed. Or if they absolutely had to mention a brother, they would say with a dismissive wave of their hands, "Oh, we have a distant cousin who helps around the house with odd jobs." They were ashamed of him, ashamed of the man who had given up everything so they could become everything. The resentment grew in the background like mold in a damp room, spreading slowly but steadily. They started calling their mother and complaining about Fred behind his back. "Mama, why is Fred still doing that dirty scrap metal job? It's so embarrassing. Can't you tell him to find something better? What will people think when they find out our brother is a trash dealer?" And Mama, God bless her soul, would scream at them over the phone until her voice was hoarse. "It is because of that dirty job that you are wearing Gucci. It is because of his sweat and blood that you are smelling nice and living in your big houses. Have you people lost your minds?" But they didn't want to hear it, and they definitely didn't want to believe it. To them, Fred was just a lazy man with no ambition, someone who liked playing in the trash because he was too stupid or too unmotivated to do anything better with his life. They had completely rewritten history in their minds, convincing themselves that they had achieved everything on their own through hard work and intelligence, conveniently forgetting who had paid for every single textbook, every single meal, every single opportunity they ever had. Then came Mama's 60th birthday, which was supposed to be a celebration but turned into something else entirely. The siblings finally decided to come back to Lagos after years of staying away, and they rolled up to the family house in a convoy that looked like a presidential motorcade. A G-Wagon, a Lexus, and a Range Rover, all gleaming and expensive and loud. The neighbors were peeping from their windows and balconies, whispering and pointing, because this kind of display doesn't happen every day in that neighborhood. Mama ran out of the house like a woman half her age, dancing and screaming with joy because her children had finally come home. "My sons are back. My daughter is back." She was hugging Josh and squeezing him tight, hugging Charity and spinning her around. "Mama officer, Mama doctor," she chanted like a hype man at a concert, completely overwhelmed with happiness. Then Fred walked out of the house, and the atmosphere changed immediately. He had just finished working at the scrapyard because he wanted to complete one last load so he could afford to buy drinks for the birthday party. He had washed his face and hands as best as he could, but he was still wearing his work clothes, a faded polo shirt and jeans that had seen better days and were stained with grease and dust. But his face was lit up with a genuine smile, the kind of smile that comes from deep love and excitement, because he was finally going to see his baby brother Josh after so long. "Josh, my brother!" Fred called out with his arms open wide, ready for a hug, ready to welcome his siblings home. The atmosphere froze like someone had pressed pause on the entire scene. Josh took a deliberate step back and covered his nose with his hand like he had just smelled something rotten. Whoa, easy there. Charity looked Fred up and down with pure disgust written all over her face, her lip curling like she had just tasted something bitter. "Fred, why do you look like you just wrestled a pig in the mud? What is wrong with you?" "I was working," Fred said, and his smile was already fading, confusion and hurt creeping into his eyes. "I wanted to finish the load so I could pay for the party drinks and make sure we had enough for everyone." "We don't need your dirty money," Peter scoffed, brushing imaginary dust off his impeccable designer suit like Fred's presence alone was contaminating him. "We brought champagne. Expensive champagne. The real stuff." Mama tried to intervene, stepping between them with her hands raised. "Your brother is here. Can you people just embrace him and be happy? This is a family reunion." "Embrace who?" Charity asked, looking at her perfectly manicured nails instead of at Fred. "Mama, look at him. Look at him well. You need to use hand sanitizer and antiseptic capsules if you touch him. He looks infectious, like he's carrying diseases." Fred's world was crumbling, and you could see it happening in real time. What happens next will shock you to your core. "Infect who?" Mama snapped back at Charity, and her voice had that dangerous edge that every Nigerian mother gets when their patience has completely run out. "Are you mad? Have you lost your senses? This is your blood. Your own brother. The same blood running through your veins." "He is not my brother," Josh said coldly, and the words came out of his mouth like ice chunks falling onto concrete. He looked at Fred like he was staring at a complete stranger, someone he had never met before in his life. "Honestly, Mama, I sometimes question if you gave birth to him. He's like a photocopy, a bad photocopy that came out blurry and useless." Fred stood there in the middle of the compound, and his hands were shaking at his sides, trembling with a mixture of hurt and anger that was building up inside him like pressure in a container that was about to explode. "I paid for your stethoscope, Josh," Fred said, and his voice was cracking now, breaking apart with emotion. "I paid for it with this so-called filth. I paid for every single textbook you ever owned, every meal you ever ate in medical school, every transport fare, everything." "Oh, shut up," Charity yelled, and she threw her hands in the air like Fred was saying the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. "You paid with what exactly? With scraps? With garbage? You are lazy, Fred. Look at your mates. Look at people your age. You are 32 years old and you are playing with trash in a dirty yard while we are building empires in Abuja. You are a disgrace to this family. A complete and total disgrace." "This is trespass," Peter shouted, and he was pointing his finger at Fred like he was making a legal argument in court. "His poverty is trespassing on our success. This boy standing here, he doesn't deserve to be among us. He doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as us." "Exactly," Josh chimed in, and he was nodding his head vigorously like Peter had just said the smartest thing in the world. "Sit on the floor. I beg you in the name of God. Don't touch the furniture with your dirty clothes. You're gonna ruin everything." Mama lost it completely at that point. She started screaming and crying at the same time, tears streaming down her face as she grabbed Fred's arm and tried to pull him closer to her. "He is my son, my first son, the head of this family. Fred, come here. Come stand with me. Mama, you will infect yourself." Charity screamed, and she actually ran forward and pulled her mother back away from Fred like he was carrying a contagious disease. "This is evil. Why do you love mediocrity so much? Why do you defend failure? We are trying to be something in life, and you keep dragging us down with this connection to poverty." Fred looked at all three of them standing there in their expensive clothes and their expensive shoes and their expensive watches, and something inside him finally broke. "What is my offense?" he asked, and his voice was barely above a whisper now, but somehow it cut through all the yelling and screaming. "What did I do to you people? Just like you came back home, I am here too. I am your brother. What is my offense? Tell me what I did wrong." "Your offense is that you are a failure." Josh spat out the words like venom, like poison he had been holding in his mouth for years. You are supposed to be in the motor park with the other touts and area boys, not in a house of rich, successful brothers and sisters. You don't belong here anymore. Saved by who? Fred whispered, and he was staring at Josh with eyes that were filled with tears that refused to fall. You think you saved yourselves? You think you got to where you are on your own? We worked hard. Charity yelled back at him, and she was getting more aggressive now, stepping closer to Fred with her finger pointing at his chest. We studied day and night. We made sacrifices. We pushed ourselves. While you were doing whatever this is, playing in the dirt like a child, I put you in that school, Fred roared, and this time he finally lost his temper completely. His voice echoed across the compound so loud that the neighbors definitely heard it. I put every single one of you in school. I paid for everything. I gave up my life so you could have yours. Lies. Peter laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that had no humor in it at all, just cruelty and mockery. Mama did that. Mama worked hard and made provisions for us. You deal in scraps, Fred, or Ferdinand, or whatever your name is. You are a scrap dealer. That is all you will ever be. That is your destiny, and you need to accept it. The tension in that living room was so thick you could choke on it, so heavy you could feel it pressing down on your chest. Mama was crying openly now, holding onto Fred's arm with both hands and refusing to let go, while the three so-called successful siblings stood on the other side of the room, united in their arrogance and their complete denial of reality. It was like watching a family tear itself apart in real time, ripping at the seams until there was nothing left but threads. But then something changed in Fred's face. The hurt that had been swimming in his eyes for the past 15 minutes suddenly vanished, replaced by something else entirely. Something cold and calculating and dangerous. His whole demeanor shifted like someone had flipped a switch inside him, and he reached into his back pocket with a slow, deliberate movement. The siblings actually flinched when they saw his hand move, and you could see the fear flash across their faces. Maybe they thought he had a weapon or something dangerous, but they were wrong. Fred didn't pull out a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a phone, but not just any phone. It was a very expensive, very specific satellite phone that looked like something a military officer or government official would carry. None of them had ever seen anything like it before, and they definitely didn't recognize it. The phone rang once with a sharp, professional tone, and Fred put it to his ear while staring directly into Josh's eyes with a gaze that could freeze water. "Hello?" "Yes," Fred said, and his voice dropped an entire octave, sounding nothing like the scrap dealer they thought they knew. He sounded like a completely different person, someone with authority and power and connections. "Cancel the transfer." "Yes, the one for the Abuja Medical Center." "And the land allocation for the law firm? Revoke it immediately. I want it done within the hour." He hung up the phone with a decisive click, and the room went so silent you could hear a pin drop on carpet. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring and your heart beat faster, because you know something major just happened, but you don't understand what it is yet. Josh frowned, and a nervous sweat was breaking out on his forehead now, tiny beads forming along his hairline. What was that? What medical center are you talking about? What transfer? Fred looked at his so-called rich brothers and sisters, and something had fundamentally changed in his appearance. He didn't look dirty anymore. He didn't look poor or pathetic or like someone who should be sitting on the floor. He looked powerful and in control and absolutely terrifying. "You think I just pick up trash for a living?" Fred asked, and his voice was low and calm but somehow more frightening than if he had been yelling. "You think that's all I do? Mama told you I deal in scraps, which is technically true, but she didn't tell you that I own the entire recycling plant that exports container loads to China every single month. She didn't tell you that I own the land your precious hospital in Abuja is built on, Josh. Every square meter of it." Charity let out a gasp that sounded like someone had punched her in the stomach, and her hand flew to her mouth. "You're lying. You're making this up to save face." "Do I look like I'm lying?" Fred stepped forward, and for the first time in this entire confrontation, the rich, successful siblings took a step backward in fear. The roles had completely reversed in a matter of seconds. "I was going to sign the deed of transfer to you today, Josh. It was going to be my birthday gift to Mama. I was going to give you the land for free, no strings attached, so you could expand your medical practice without worrying about rent or property issues." He looked down at the satellite phone in his hand, turning it over slowly, and then looked back up at them with eyes that showed no mercy whatsoever. "But now?" Fred smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes at all. It was the kind of smile that makes your blood run cold. "Now, I think I want my rent, and I want it with interest." Effective yesterday. Going back 3 years. Suddenly, Josh's phone pinged with a notification. Then Charity's phone buzzed. Then Peter's phone chimed. All three of them scrambled to pull out their devices, their hands shaking as they unlocked their screens and read whatever message had just come through. Their faces went pale. Not just pale, but white as a sheet, like all the blood had drained out of their bodies and pooled at their feet. Josh's mouth fell open and stayed that way, and Charity actually stumbled backward like she had been physically pushed. "Fred," Josh whispered, and his voice was trembling so badly he could barely get the words out. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" Fred didn't answer the question. Instead, he turned to Mama, who was standing there looking completely confused about what was happening, and he kissed her gently on the forehead like nothing dramatic was going on at all. "Happy birthday, Mama," he said softly, and then he started walking toward the door. "Where are you going?" Charity screamed, and her voice had gone from arrogant and dismissive to panicked and desperate in less than 30 seconds. She actually ran after him, her expensive heels clicking on the floor, and grabbed the same arm she had been too disgusted to touch half a minute ago. "Fred, wait, don't leave. We need to talk about this." Fred stopped walking and looked down at her hand gripping his dirty shirt sleeve. Then he looked up at her face, and his expression was completely neutral, showing absolutely nothing. "Don't touch me," Fred said softly, and his voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. "You might catch poverty. You might get infected, remember?" Hey fam, I know you're on the edge of your seat right now wondering what just happened. If you're enjoying this crazy family drama, please smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think Fred did. Do you think he's bluffing, or is this real? And make sure you subscribe to our channel, because what happened next is going to blow your mind. Now let's see what happens next, because things are about to get even more intense. He ripped his arm away from Charity's grip with enough force to make her stumble, and he walked out the door without looking back at any of them. But as he stepped out onto the porch and started heading toward the gate, a black SUV with diplomatic plates suddenly pulled into the driveway, moving fast and blocking his exit completely. The vehicle was sleek and official looking, the kind of car that makes you nervous just by seeing it. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from either side of the SUV, and they were definitely not regular police officers. They looked like they belonged to some specialized intelligence agency or federal security service. They had earpieces and stern faces, and the kind of presence that made it clear they were not here for a friendly chat. "Mr. Frederick Benson?" one of them said in a formal, clipped tone. "Yes," Fred answered, and he didn't sound surprised or scared at all. "We have a problem at the port," the agent said, pulling out an official-looking badge. "They found what was inside the copper shipment. You need to come with us immediately. This is not a request." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just been dropped. Fred looked back at his siblings who were watching from the doorway with their mouths hanging open and their eyes wide with confusion and terror, and then he looked at the agents standing in front of him with their serious faces and their official badges. He let out a long breath and muttered under his breath, "I guess the secret is out now?" He got into the back of the SUV without resisting or asking questions, moving like someone who had done this before and knew exactly what the protocol was. The door slammed shut with a heavy, final sound, and the vehicle sped away from the house, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. The diplomatic plates gleamed in the afternoon sun as the SUV disappeared around the corner, and just like that, Fred was gone. Josh dropped to his knees right there in the driveway, clutching his phone with both hands like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. His expensive suit got dusty and dirty from the ground, but he didn't even notice or care. "He froze the accounts," Josh stammered, staring at his screen with eyes that couldn't quite process what they were seeing. "He froze everything. The hospital accounts, my personal accounts, everything. There's nothing. It's all locked." Charity was scrolling through her phone frantically, swiping and tapping with shaking fingers, and her perfectly made-up face was streaked with tears that were ruining her mascara. "The law firm," she whispered, and her voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "The building lease. It says here that the property owner has initiated immediate eviction proceedings. We have 72 hours to vacate. How is this possible?" "How?" Peter just stood there frozen like a statue, his political confidence completely shattered and replaced with the expression of a man who had just realized he had made the biggest mistake of his entire life. His hands were trembling so badly that he could barely hold his phone steady enough to read the multiple notifications that kept popping up on his screen, one after another like a relentless attack. Mama just stood there in the middle of the chaos, wiping her tears with the edge of her wrapper, and she whispered in a voice that was filled with sadness and disappointment. "I told you. "I told you people. I warned you again and again." He was the head of this family. He was the one holding everything together, and you treated him like garbage. But what none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly understand yet, was that this was just the beginning of the unraveling. The real story was so much deeper and more complicated than any of them could imagine. Let's rewind a bit and talk about what Fred had actually been doing for the past 12 years, because the scrap metal business was only a small part of a much bigger picture. When Fred took over his father's recycling business at 20 years old, he didn't just maintain it and keep it running at the same level. He transformed it completely, expanding it in ways that nobody in the family had noticed because they were too busy living their own lives in Abuja and abroad. Fred had a gift for business that nobody had recognized, a natural instinct for seeing opportunities where other people only saw trash. Within the first 2 years, he had doubled the size of the operation by securing contracts with major construction companies across Lagos who needed someone to handle their metal waste. He worked 18-hour days, learning everything he could about international commodity trading and export regulations and market trends. By year 3, Fred had established connections with Chinese manufacturing companies who were desperate for raw materials, especially copper and aluminum. He learned Mandarin through online courses late at night after work, teaching himself the language while his siblings were posting party pictures on social media. He learned how to negotiate in their cultural context and how to build the kind of trust that turns business contacts into long-term partnerships. By year 5, Fred wasn't just collecting scrap metal anymore. He was running a full-scale export operation with 3 warehouses across Lagos and a fleet of trucks that moved materials from collection points to processing facilities to the port. He had government contracts and licenses that most people couldn't even dream of obtaining. But he never told his family any of this because he didn't want them to feel obligated to him or to change how they treated him. He wanted them to succeed on their own merit, or at least that's what he told himself. The truth was more complicated, though. Part of Fred had wanted to see if his siblings would ever acknowledge what he had done for them without being forced to. Part of him had hoped that one day they would come back home and say thank you, that they would recognize his sacrifice and love him for it. But that day never came, and with each passing year, the gap between them grew wider until it became a canyon that seemed impossible to cross. Now here's where things get interesting, and I mean really interesting. About 3 years ago, Fred was approached by someone from the government, specifically from a specialized intelligence unit that most Nigerians don't even know exists. They had been watching his business operations and had noticed something unusual. Fred was moving massive amounts of copper and steel out of the country, with remarkable efficiency and zero corruption complaints, which in Nigeria is practically unheard of. Most export businesses at that scale are drowning in bribes and payoffs and deals with corrupt officials, but Fred ran everything clean and legitimate. The government representative made Fred an offer that would change everything. They needed someone trustworthy to help them track illegal mining operations and smuggling networks that were stealing Nigeria's natural resources and selling them abroad through fake export companies. They needed someone who understood the scrap metal and recycling industry from the inside, someone who could move through those circles without raising suspicion. And they were willing to pay very well for that service. Fred said yes, but not because of the money. He said yes because he genuinely believed in the mission and wanted to do something meaningful for his country. So for the past 3 years, Fred had been living a double life. During the day, he was the scrap dealer that everyone saw, the man covered in dust and grease. But behind the scenes, he was feeding intelligence to the government about smuggling routes and corrupt officials and illegal operations. He was helping to recover millions of dollars worth of stolen resources. And the satellite phone that he had pulled out in front of his siblings, that was his direct line to his handlers in Abuja, the people who coordinated his intelligence work and kept him protected. The accounts he had frozen belonged to properties and businesses that he had quietly purchased over the years, using his legitimate earnings. And yes, the hospital that Josh was so proud of was built on land that Fred owned through a shell company. The law firm building that Charity worked in, same thing. Fred had been their silent benefactor all along, supporting them from the shadows while they spat in his face. But now we need to talk about what was happening in that SUV as it raced through Lagos traffic toward the port. Fred sat in the back seat between the 2 agents, and his mind was racing even though his face remained calm and composed. What exactly did they find? He asked quietly. The agent on his left, a man named Daniel who Fred had worked with before, turned to look at him with an expression that was hard to read. We don't know yet. The customs officials did a random inspection on your copper shipment to China, the one that was supposed to leave port yesterday. They brought in the scanners and dogs, and something triggered an alert. They found hidden compartments. Fred's stomach dropped, but he kept his voice steady. Hidden compartments? That's impossible. I inspect every single shipment personally before it leaves my warehouse. Every container is checked and verified. We know, the other agent said, and his name was Christopher. That's why we're bringing you in as a witness rather than a suspect. Someone tampered with your shipment after it left your facility. Someone who had access to the port and knew your shipping schedule. This is bigger than just your business, Fred. This might be connected to the network we've been investigating. The SUV pulled up to the port entrance, and Fred could see the heavy security presence immediately. There were military personnel everywhere, armed officers standing at checkpoints, and multiple government vehicles parked near the customs inspection area. This wasn't a normal inspection. This was a major operation. And somehow Fred's business had gotten caught right in the middle of it. They walked through several security checkpoints, showing badges and IDs at each one, until they reached a large warehouse where the shipping containers were being held. The air inside smelled like metal and ocean salt, and something else that Fred couldn't quite identify. His container was sitting in the middle of the floor, surrounded by officials and inspectors and people in hazmat suits. Mr. Benson, a customs official said, approaching with a tablet in his hands. Can you confirm that this is your shipment? Container number HZB7743, registered to Benson Recycling and Export Limited? Yes, Fred said, looking at the container with growing concern. That's my container. It was supposed to contain processed copper wire and aluminum sheets for export to Shenzhen. I have all the documentation. We're sure you do, the official said, and he didn't sound accusatory, just tired and worried. But we need you to look at what we found inside, hidden beneath the legitimate materials. Come with me. They led Fred to the opened container, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Underneath the layers of copper and metal that he had properly documented and prepared for export, there were dozens of small packages wrapped in waterproof material. The packages had been expertly hidden in custom-built compartments welded into the container walls, invisible to casual inspection. We haven't opened them all yet, Daniel explained, but the ones we have tested so far contain uncut diamonds, millions of dollars worth, illegally mined from somewhere in West Africa and being smuggled out through your legitimate export business. Fred felt like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Someone had used his business, his reputation, his clean record, as a cover for diamond smuggling. Someone had set him up, and if this got out publicly before they could prove his innocence, everything he had built would be destroyed. His business licenses would be revoked, his accounts would be frozen by the actual government this time, and he might even face criminal charges. I didn't do this, Fred said firmly, looking Daniel straight in the eye. I swear on everything I have I didn't know these were here. Someone planted them. We believe you, Christopher said, putting a hand on Fred's shoulder. But here's the problem. Only 5 people had access to this container after it left your warehouse and before it reached this inspection point. 3 of them are port workers who have been here for 20 years with clean records. One of them is the shipping company's logistics manager. And the last one is someone from your own company, someone who signed off on the final transport documents. Fred's mind was racing through possibilities, thinking about everyone who worked for him and had access to his shipping schedules. Who signed the documents, he asked, but somehow he already knew the answer before they told him. Hey, my people, can you believe what's happening right now? Fred goes from exposing his ungrateful siblings to being caught up in an international smuggling operation. If you're hooked on this story, please like this video and comment your theories about who set Fred up. Now let's get back to the port, where Fred's world is about to explode. Your warehouse manager, Daniel said, pulling out a photo on his phone and showing it to Fred. Marcus Okonkwo. He's been with you for how long? Fred stared at the photo, and his heart sank into his shoes. Marcus had been his first employee, the first person he had hired when the business started growing. Marcus had been there from the beginning, working alongside Fred through the hardest years. Marcus has been with me for 11 years, Fred said quietly, and his voice sounded hollow like something had been scooped out of him. He was my first real employee. I hired him when nobody else would, because he had a criminal record from when he was young, just small stuff, petty theft when he was a teenager trying to survive. I gave him a second chance. I trusted him with everything. Daniel nodded slowly, putting his phone away. We know. We've been building a file on him for the past 6 months. Marcus has been making deposits into a foreign account, small amounts at first, but they've been getting bigger. $20,000 here, $30,000 there. The money is coming from a source we've been tracking, a syndicate that operates between Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. They smuggle conflict diamonds and use legitimate businesses as cover. 6 months? Fred repeated, and he could feel anger rising in his chest like hot water about to boil over. You've known about this for 6 months and you didn't tell me? My business, my reputation, everything I've built could have been destroyed. We needed to catch them in the act, Christopher explained, and he sounded apologetic but firm. If we had told you earlier, you might have confronted Marcus or changed your procedures, and they would have just disappeared and found another route. We needed solid evidence, and now we have it. This shipment is the proof we needed to bring down the entire network. Fred wanted to punch something, but instead he took a deep breath and forced himself to think clearly. Where is Marcus now? Have you picked him up yet? That's the problem, Daniel said, and he exchanged a look with Christopher that made Fred's stomach twist. Marcus disappeared 3 hours ago. He didn't show up for his shift at the warehouse, and when we sent people to his apartment, it was completely empty. No furniture, no clothes, nothing. Like he was never there. He's in the wind. Fred closed his eyes and tried to process everything that was happening. In the span of less than 2 hours, his entire life had been turned upside down. His siblings had revealed their true colors, and he had cut them off financially. Government agents had discovered illegal diamonds in his shipment, and now his most trusted employee had betrayed him and vanished. It was too much, too fast, and even someone as strong as Fred had limits to what he could handle. There's something else you need to know, Christopher said, and his tone made it clear that the bad news wasn't finished yet. We traced some of Marcus's communications over the past few weeks. He's been talking to someone, giving them detailed information about your movements and your schedule. Whoever this person is, they knew exactly when you would be at your mother's birthday party today. They knew you would be distracted. What are you saying? Fred asked, opening his eyes and looking at the agent with growing dread. We think someone close to you is involved, Daniel said carefully. Someone who had access to your personal calendar and knew about family events. Someone who could feed Marcus information about when you would be vulnerable. Do you have any idea who that might be? Fred's mind immediately went to his family, to his siblings, who had been so distant and disconnected for years. But that didn't make sense, did it? They barely paid attention to him or his life. How would they even know enough about his business to help Marcus betray him? Unless there was something he was missing, some connection he hadn't seen yet. Before Fred could answer, his personal phone started ringing in his pocket. Not the satellite phone, but his regular cell phone that he used for normal business and family calls. He pulled it out and looked at the screen, and his heart skipped a beat when he saw the name displayed there. It was Charity calling him. Don't answer it yet, Daniel said quickly, holding up his hand. Let us set up a trace first. If she's calling you right now, there might be a reason. Give us 30 seconds. Christopher was already pulling out some kind of technical device and connecting it to a laptop. He worked fast, his fingers flying over the keyboard, and then he nodded to Fred. Okay, answer it now. Keep her talking as long as you can, and try to find out what she wants. Act normal, like nothing has changed. Fred swiped to answer the call and put the phone to his ear, and he was surprised at how steady his voice sounded when he spoke. Charity. Fred! Charity's voice came through the speaker, and she sounded panicked and desperate in a way he had never heard before. Fred, please, you have to listen to me. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but something terrible is happening and I need your help. Please don't hang up. I'm listening, Fred said, and he watched Christopher typing on the laptop, tracking the call. It's Josh, Charity said, and she was breathing hard like she had been running or crying or both. Fred, Josh is in serious trouble. After you left with those agents, he got a phone call from someone. I don't know who it was, but his face went completely white when he answered. Then he just ran to his car and drove away without saying anything to any of us. Mama is losing her mind with worry, and Peter is useless as always. I tried calling Josh, but he's not picking up his phone. Fred felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of phone call? Did you hear what the person said? No, but Fred, before he ran off, he turned to me and said something really strange. He said, "Tell Fred I'm sorry. Tell him Marcus was right about everything." What does that mean? Who is Marcus? What is Josh involved in? The warehouse seemed to spin around Fred as the pieces started falling into place in his mind, forming a picture that was so ugly and devastating that he almost couldn't believe it. Marcus was right about everything. That's what Josh had said. Marcus had been talking to Josh. His own brother had been working with the man who betrayed him. Charity, listen to me very carefully, Fred said, and his voice had gone cold and hard. I need you to tell me everything you know about Josh's finances. Has he been spending money on anything unusual lately? Any big purchases or investments that didn't make sense? I don't know, Charity said, and she sounded confused and scared. He bought a new car last month, a Mercedes, but he said it was from his hospital bonuses. And he's been talking about buying property in Dubai, but I thought he was just dreaming. Fred, what's going on? You're scaring me. Where's Mama right now? Fred asked, ignoring her question. She's at home, crying in her room. Peter is with her. Fred, please, you have to tell me what's happening. Is Josh in danger? Did he do something wrong? Fred looked at Daniel and Christopher, who were both staring at him with intense focus, and he made a decision. Charity, I need you to stay at the house with Mama and Peter. Lock all the doors and windows. Don't let anyone inside except me. I'm coming back there as soon as I can, and I'll explain everything. But right now, you need to trust me and do exactly what I'm telling you. Fred, you're really scaring me now, Charity whispered, and for the first time in years, she sounded like his little sister again, instead of the arrogant corporate executive who had looked down on him. Please tell me Josh is okay. Please tell me he's not in serious trouble. Fred wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, that Josh would be okay, but he couldn't lie to her. Not about this. I don't know, Charity. I honestly don't know. Just stay at the house and wait for me. I'll be there as soon as I can. He hung up the phone before she could ask any more questions, and he turned to face the agents with a look of grim determination on his face. My brother Josh is involved in this. He's been working with Marcus. I don't know how deep it goes or what exactly they were planning, but he just ran off after getting a phone call, and he left a message saying that Marcus was right about everything. We need to find him before the syndicate does, Daniel said, already pulling out his own phone to make calls. If Josh was working with Marcus and the operation just got busted, the people running the smuggling network are going to assume he talked or cooperated with us. They're going to want to silence him permanently. The word permanently hung in the air like a death sentence, and Fred felt his chest tighten with fear and anger and a dozen other emotions he couldn't name. Josh had betrayed him, had worked with Marcus to use his business for illegal smuggling, had probably been feeding information to criminals for months or even years. But Josh was still his brother, the same little boy Fred had sacrificed everything to put through medical school. The same brother who used to follow him around the house asking questions and looking up to him like he was a superhero. We have to find him, Fred said, and his voice was shaking now. Whatever he's done, whatever mistakes he's made, we have to find him before they do. He's still my brother. Christopher was already coordinating with other agents through his radio, sending out alerts and descriptions and last known locations. We're pulling traffic camera footage now to track his vehicle. What kind of car does he drive? A black Mercedes S-Class, Fred said, pulling up a photo on his phone from one of Josh's social media posts where he was showing off the new car. License plate number LND847FG. He bought it about a month ago, paid cash for it apparently. Paid cash? Daniel raised his eyebrows. For a brand new Mercedes? On a doctor's salary? That's easily 40 to 50 million naira. Where did he get that kind of money? Fred didn't answer because he already knew the answer, and it made him feel sick to his stomach. Josh had gotten that money from the smuggling operation, from betraying his own brother and selling out his family. The same brother who had called him dirty and infectious and told him to sit on the floor just a few hours ago had been stealing from him and using him all along. Hey fam, this story just keeps getting more and more intense. Fred's own brother is involved in the smuggling operation, and now Josh's life might be in danger from the criminals he was working with. If you're as shocked as I am, please drop a like on this video and comment what you think is going to happen next. Will Fred be able to save Josh, even after everything his brother did to him? Now let's get back to Fred, because things are about to reach a breaking point. A young officer came running into the warehouse, out of breath and holding a tablet. Sirs, we have a location on the Mercedes. Traffic cameras picked it up heading toward the 3rd Mainland Bridge about 20 minutes ago, but then it stopped in the middle of the bridge and hasn't moved since. Stopped in the middle of the bridge? Fred repeated, and a horrible thought started forming in his mind. Why would he stop there? Unless... He didn't finish the sentence because he was already running toward the exit, not waiting for permission or instructions from the agents. He could hear Daniel and Christopher shouting behind him and running to catch up, but Fred didn't stop. The 3rd Mainland Bridge was one of the longest bridges in Africa, stretching over 11 kilometers across the Lagos Lagoon, and if Josh had stopped his car in the middle of it, there was only one reason Fred could think of. Josh was going to jump. Fred burst out of the warehouse and jumped into the first vehicle he saw, which happened to be one of the port security trucks with the keys still in the ignition. Daniel and Christopher were right behind him, shouting for him to wait, but Fred didn't have time to wait. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, and the truck lurched forward, tires screeching on the concrete as he sped toward the port exit. Fred, slow down. Daniel yelled from the passenger seat where he had managed to jump in at the last second. You're going to get us all unalive driving like this. My brother is about to jump off the third mainland bridge, Fred shot back, weaving through traffic with a skill that suggested this wasn't his first time driving like a maniac through Lagos streets. I don't have time to slow down. Christopher was in the back seat coordinating with other units through his radio, his voice urgent and clipped. All units, we have a possible suicide attempt on the third mainland bridge. Black Mercedes S-Class, license plate LND 847FG. Subject is Dr. Joshua Benson, 30 years old, considered a flight risk and possibly connected to ongoing smuggling investigation. We need traffic units to block both ends of the bridge, and we need negotiators on scene immediately. The drive to the bridge felt like it took forever, even though Fred was going almost twice the speed limit, running red lights and honking at other vehicles to get out of his way. His mind was racing faster than the truck, playing through 1,000 different scenarios of what might happen when he got there. Would Josh really jump? Was this all just a panic reaction, or had his brother been planning this? And more importantly, could Fred even save someone who had betrayed him so completely? When they finally reached the approach to the third mainland bridge, Fred could see that traffic was already backing up because police units had arrived and were setting up barricades. He drove the truck right up to the police line, barely stopping before he jumped out and started running on foot toward where the Mercedes was stopped in the distance. "Sir, you can't go out there." A young police officer tried to grab Fred's arm, but Fred shook him off without breaking stride. "That's my brother," Fred shouted over his shoulder, and he kept running. The bridge stretched out ahead of him, and he could see Josh's car about 300 meters away, stopped in the middle lane with the driver's door hanging open. As Fred got closer, his heart pounding in his chest and his lungs burning from the sprint, he could see a figure standing on the wrong side of the bridge railing, holding onto one of the support cables with both hands. It was Josh, and he was looking down at the dark water of the Lagos Lagoon far below. "Josh!" Fred screamed, slowing down as he got closer because he didn't want to startle his brother into letting go. "Josh, don't do it, please." Josh turned his head at the sound of Fred's voice, and even from 20 meters away, Fred could see that his brother's face was streaked with tears. Josh looked nothing like the confident, arrogant doctor who had told Fred to sit on the floor just hours ago. He looked broken and terrified and lost, like a little boy who had gotten himself into something he couldn't handle. "Fred," Josh said, and his voice was shaking so badly that Fred could barely understand him. "Fred, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You don't understand what I've done. You don't understand how bad it is." Fred held up his hands in a calming gesture and took a few slow steps closer, his shoes making soft sounds on the bridge surface. "Then tell me, Josh. Help me understand. Whatever it is, whatever you've done, we can figure it out together. But you have to come back over the railing first. Please." "No." Josh shook his head violently, and for a terrifying moment his grip on the cable loosened and Fred's heart stopped. "You don't get it. They're going to eliminate me, Fred. The people I was working with, they know the shipment got caught. They know I'm a liability now. They've already sent people after me. I got a call from Marcus 20 minutes ago, and he said, they're coming for me and for everyone I love. They're going to hurt Mama. They're going to hurt Charity and Peter. They're going to hurt you. Let them try," Fred said, and he took another step closer. Close enough now that he could reach out and touch Josh if he wanted to. "I have government protection, Josh. Those agents you saw at the house? They work for a specialized intelligence unit. I've been helping them investigate smuggling networks for 3 years. We can protect the family. We can protect you. But only if you come back over this railing and face what you've done." Josh let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob, and he looked at Fred with eyes that were filled with self-hatred and regret. "You've been working for the government? Of course you have. Of course you're secretly some kind of hero while I've been the villain this whole time. Do you know why I did it, Fred? Do you want to know why I betrayed you?" "Tell me," Fred said softly, and he meant it. He genuinely wanted to understand how things had gotten to this point. "Because I was jealous," Josh shouted, and his voice echoed across the water below. "Because everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have you as a brother, how you sacrificed everything for me, how I owed you my entire life. Do you know what that feels like? To be constantly reminded that everything you've achieved isn't really yours? That you're just living off someone else's sacrifice?" Tears were running down Fred's face now, but he didn't wipe them away. "So you decided to destroy me instead? You decided to use my business for smuggling diamonds and put everything I built at risk?" "Marcus approached me about 8 months ago," Josh said, and his words were coming out in a rush now, like he needed to confess everything before it was too late. "He said he knew about your government work, and he wanted to use your legitimate shipments as cover for the smuggling operation. He offered me $200,000 just to give him information about your shipping schedule and to look the other way. I thought it would be one time, just once, and then I could finally afford the lifestyle I was supposed to have. But it wasn't one time. They kept demanding more and more, and I kept giving it to them because I was in too deep to stop. $200,000, Fred repeated, and he felt sick. You sold me out for $200,000. I know, Josh whispered. I know what I did, and now people are going to get eliminated because of my choices. Marcus told me they have orders to clean up loose ends, and that includes family members. They know where Mama lives, Fred. They know everything. Behind Fred, he could hear Daniel and Christopher approaching carefully, along with what sounded like trained negotiators. But Fred held up his hand to keep them back, because he knew that Josh would only talk to him right now, only trust him despite everything that had happened. Josh listened to me very carefully, Fred said, and he took one more step forward until he was right next to the railing, close enough to grab his brother if needed. The people you were working with, they're already being rounded up. The syndicate is falling apart as we speak, but I need you to trust me one more time. Come back over this railing and help us finish taking them down. Tell the authorities everything you know. Make this right. Make it right? Josh laughed bitterly. How do I make this right, Fred? How do I fix the fact that I betrayed the one person who loved me unconditionally? The one person who gave up everything for me? By living, Fred said simply. By coming back and facing the consequences and doing better. By helping us protect Mama and Charity and Peter from the people who want to hurt them. By being my brother again. Even if I can never trust you the same way. Please, Josh, please don't jump. For a long moment, Josh just stood there on the wrong side of the railing, swaying slightly in the wind that came off the lagoon. Fred could see him considering his options, weighing his choices, deciding whether redemption was even possible for someone who had fallen so far. Then Josh's phone rang in his pocket, the sound sharp and jarring in the tense silence. Josh pulled it out with one shaking hand, still holding onto the cable with the other, and looked at the screen. His face went even whiter than before, if that was even possible. It's them, Josh whispered. It's the syndicate. They're calling me right now. Don't answer it, Fred said urgently, reaching out his hand. Josh, don't answer that phone. Just take my hand and come back over the railing. But Josh was already swiping to answer the call, putting it on speaker so Fred could hear. A cold, emotionless voice came through the phone, speaking in accented English that suggested the speaker was not Nigerian. Dr. Benson, the voice said. I assume you've heard about the situation at the port. This is very disappointing. We had such a good arrangement. I didn't talk to anyone, Josh said desperately. I swear I didn't cooperate with the authorities. The inspection was random. It wasn't because of me. Perhaps, the voice said. But you've become a risk we can no longer tolerate. I'm looking at your mother's house right now, Doctor. Such a nice neighborhood. So many windows. It would be very easy for something unfortunate to happen. Fred's blood ran cold. Josh, hang up the phone right now. Hey, my people. I know you're absolutely hooked right now because this situation just went from bad to catastrophic. If you're on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button and comment what you think is going to happen. Is Mama in danger? Will Josh survive this? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel because you're going to need to see what happens next. Now let's get back to this nightmare on the bridge. But Josh wasn't listening to Fred anymore. He was staring at his phone screen with horror as the voice continued talking. You have a choice, Doctor. You can continue to be a problem, in which case your family will pay the price. Or you can eliminate yourself from the equation, and will consider your debt paid. Your family will be left alone. You have 60 seconds to decide. The line went dead, and Josh looked at Fred with tears streaming down his face. They're at the house, Fred. They're gonna hurt Mama if I don't jump. It's a bluff, Fred said, but even as he said it, his own phone was buzzing with an incoming call. He pulled it out and saw it was Charity calling again. He answered it on speaker. Fred. Charity's voice came through, high-pitched with terror. Fred, there are men outside the house. 3 of them in a black car. They're just sitting there watching us. I called the police, but they said it would take 30 minutes to get here. What do we do? Fred's mind was racing, calculating distances and response times and possibilities. Charity, lock every door and window. Push furniture against the doors. I'm sending help right now. He looked at Christopher, who was already on his radio, calling for immediate police response to the house. It's too late, Josh said quietly, and he let go of the cable with one hand. This is the only way to keep them safe, Fred. I'm so sorry. Tell Mama I love her. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't the son she deserved. Josh, no! Fred lunged forward and grabbed his brother's shirt, holding on with both hands. Don't you dare take the easy way out and leave me to clean up this mess. Josh looked at Fred with surprise, and for a moment they were frozen like that, Fred holding onto his brother's shirt while Josh balanced on the edge between life and the abyss below. Easy way? Josh said. You think this is easy? Yes, Fred shouted. Jumping is easy? Dying is easy. Living with what you've done and trying to make it right, that's the hard part. That's the part that takes real courage. And I need you alive, Josh. I need you to help me protect our family. I can't do this without you. Behind them, Fred could hear vehicles arriving, multiple cars with sirens blaring. Christopher was shouting coordinates into his radio about the men outside Mama's house. Daniel was trying to get closer to help Fred pull Josh back over the railing. Everything was chaos and noise and desperation. And then Josh's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked down at it, and his face showed pure terror. The message had a photo attached. A photo of Mama standing in her living room window, clearly visible from outside. The text below it read, "Last chance." Josh looked at Fred with eyes that held a terrible finality in them. "I love you, brother," he said, and he let go of the cable with his other hand. Fred's grip on the shirt tightened reflexively, and he felt the fabric start to tear as Josh's weight pulled downward. Fred screamed, a sound of pure anguish and desperation, and he leaned forward over the railing, both hands wrapped around the fabric, his muscles straining with the effort of holding his brother's full weight. "Help me!" Fred screamed at Daniel and the negotiators. "Help me pull him up!" Daniel rushed forward and grabbed Fred around the waist while another officer reached over the railing to grab Josh's arm. For a few terrifying seconds, it was unclear whether they would be able to pull Josh back up or whether all of them would go over the edge together. Then Fred's phone rang again. Not Charity this time. It was the satellite phone, the secure line from his government handlers. Fred couldn't answer it because both his hands were occupied holding onto Josh, so Christopher grabbed it from Fred's pocket and answered. "Yes," Christopher said, his voice tight with strain. "What? When? Are you sure?" His expression changed from stressed to shocked to something Fred couldn't quite read. "Copy that. We're handling the situation now." He hung up and looked at Fred with wide eyes. "Fred, they got him. They got Marcus. He was trying to flee the country through Benin Republic, but our contacts intercepted him at the border 20 minutes ago. And he's talking. He's giving up everyone in the syndicate, including the people who were sent to your mother's house." As if on cue, Charity called again. Fred still couldn't answer, so Christopher put her on speaker. Fred, the police are here. The men in the black car are being arrested." "Oh my God, there are so many police cars. What is happening?" Relief flooded through Fred's body, but he couldn't celebrate yet because he was still holding his brother over the edge of the bridge. "Josh, did you hear that? The threat is over. Marcus got caught, and he's cooperating. The men at Mama's house are being arrested. You don't have to do this." Josh looked up at Fred, and his expression was a complicated mixture of hope and disbelief and exhaustion. "It's really over?" "It's over," Fred said, and he could feel his arms trembling from the strain. "But you have to help us pull you up. You have to choose to live, Josh. You have to choose our family." For what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few seconds, Josh just hung there, suspended between two worlds. And then, slowly, he reached up with his free hand and grabbed onto the railing. "Okay," Josh whispered. "Okay, I'll try. I'll try to make this right." Together, Fred and Daniel and the other officers pulled Josh back over the railing, dragging him onto the solid surface of the bridge. They all collapsed in a heap, breathing hard, and Fred wrapped his arms around his brother and held him while Josh sobbed into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry," Josh kept saying over and over. "I'm so sorry, Fred. I'm so sorry." "I know," Fred said quietly. "I know you are, and you're going to spend a very long time making this right. But you're alive. That's what matters right now." The agents put handcuffs on Josh gently but firmly because he was still technically a suspect in a major smuggling operation. Josh didn't resist, just let them secure his hands behind his back while continuing to cry. They started leading him toward one of the police vehicles, and Fred walked alongside them, not ready to let his brother out of his sight just yet. But as they approached the vehicles, Fred's satellite phone rang again. Christopher handed it to him, and Fred answered it while keeping his eyes on Josh. "Fred, this is Commander Adalik," a deep voice said. "I'm the head of the intelligence unit you've been working with. We have a situation." "Another situation?" Fred asked, and he felt exhaustion washing over him. "What now?" "Marcus is talking, like we said. But he just revealed something that changes everything. The syndicate you helped us expose, it's bigger than we thought. Much bigger. And it goes higher than we thought. Josh wasn't the only person in your family involved. Fred's blood went cold. What are you talking about? Marcus just told us that Peter, your younger brother, has been part of this operation from the beginning, not just as an accomplice, but as one of the organizers. His political connections in Abuja were how the syndicate got access to diplomatic channels and government protection. Peter's been playing you from the start, Fred. And according to our intelligence, he's not at your mother's house right now. He disappeared about an hour ago, right around the time Josh drove to the bridge. Fred looked at Josh, who had stopped crying and was staring at him with wide eyes, clearly having heard the commander's words through the phone. Peter? Josh whispered. Peter was involved too? But he always acted like he was better than all of us. He always acted like he was the honest one. Where is he? Fred asked the commander, his voice deadly calm. We don't know yet, but we need to find him before he runs. And Fred, there's one more thing. The shipment we intercepted at the port, that wasn't the main operation. Marcus says there's another shipment scheduled to leave tonight from a private airstrip outside Abuja. If that shipment gets out of the country, we lose our chance to take down the entire network. And according to Marcus, Peter is personally overseeing it. Fred looked at the bridge stretching out before him, at his brother Josh in handcuffs, at the Lagos Lagoon below, and he felt the weight of everything that had happened today pressing down on his shoulders. His family had betrayed him, his business had been used for crime, his mother's life had been threatened, and now he was being asked to help catch his youngest brother in an illegal operation. What do you need me to do? Fred asked quietly. We need you to come to Abuja, Commander Adelek said. Tonight. We need your help to identify the shipment, and to get close to Peter without raising suspicion. You're the only one he might not run from. Are you willing to do this? Fred looked at Josh one more time, then at Daniel and Christopher, who were watching him with serious expressions. He thought about Mama and Charity back at the house, probably still terrified and confused. He thought about everything he had sacrificed for this family, everything he had given up, and now he was being asked to give up even more. But he also thought about all the other families out there who were being hurt by the smuggling network, all the people who would suffer if he didn't help stop this. And he thought about what kind of man he wanted to be, what kind of example he wanted to set. I'll do it, Fred said. I'll help you catch Peter. But after this is over, I want protection for my mother and Charity. Real protection. And I want Josh to get a fair deal for his cooperation. Done, the commander said immediately. There's a helicopter waiting for you at the port. It will take you to Abuja. We have 3 hours before that shipment is scheduled to leave. That's all the time we have. Fred hung up the phone and looked at Josh. I have to go, he said. I have to finish this. Josh nodded, tears still streaming down his face. Be careful, Fred. Peter is more dangerous than you think. He's been planning this for a long time. Fred turned to leave, but Josh called out one more time. Fred! Thank you. Thank you for not letting me jump. Thank you for saving me, even after everything I did. Fred paused and looked back at his brother. That's what family does, Josh. Even when it hurts. Even when it costs everything. And then Fred started running again, this time toward the helicopter that would take him to Abuja and to a confrontation with Peter that would determine the fate of everything he had built and everyone he loved. But as the helicopter lifted off into the darkening Lagos sky, Fred received one final text message on his satellite phone. It was from an unknown number, and it contained only 4 words that made his blood run cold. Peter knows you're coming.